Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the July 25th, 2018 edition of SIG Contributor Experience. My name is Christoph Lecker. I'll be leading the call today. I am putting the meeting notes into the chat. If everyone can add their name to the attendees list, that would be great. So we'll start off with our kind of normal topics for every call. Are there any new contributors or first-time joiners to this call on the line?
Hello.
Hi, Jeffrey. Do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, my name is Jeffrey Sika. I am the other half of the Hive Mind. Bob Killen is the first half of the Hive Mind. Bob and I both work at University of Michigan, so you can actually see my desk in the background of Bob's camera if you really look. Yeah.
Well, welcome. Thank you. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
Okay. I think we're set on the community meeting this week. I think it's Chris Short. If I was reading in Contribx channel, I think Chris Short is going to be leading that call this week. I don't think he's online today, but yeah, I think he's got everything arranged.
Yeah, we're good on there.
Okay. So getting into our agenda, I'm actually going to rearrange this. Vlad, do you want to start off with your focal update right off the bat?
Sure, that'd be great. Let me share your screen. Okay, so so the last week has been, again, the biggest challenge so far has been is the kind of relevance piece of like making sure that we're always showing the right answers to people. It's basically been an endless struggle kind of, and been doing this for a while. Still haven't found the silver bullet, but making lots of like small, changes. So basically the goal here is to, so, I mean, maybe to step back a bit is like when we're displaying an answer to somebody, we want to make sure that when somebody asks a question, it's the most relevant answer to that question. So this is basically showing like the yellow and blues are when we're successfully answering a question, and the purple is when somebody's giving us feedback that it's not helpful. So we want to, I'm trying to optimize for kind of the yellows and the light blues as much as possible. So yeah, still working a lot on that. No magic bullet yet. I'm actually out to find, like even starting looking to find like, more professional data science NLP people to kind of figure this one out a little bit better. So other than that, one thing that I've been working on this week is also like, this is the storing pipeline of like, every time we ask, hey, do you want to store this for later? So basically the blue one is every time we ask, and the purple one is when actually somebody clicks the store button. And because of this kind of large drift between the two, especially on certain days, I'm realizing that like people aren't always clicking to store. So one of the changes made this week was like a small tweak to like how it looks. So I don't know if anybody remembers what it used to look like. Find the screenshot. 1 second. I have it here somewhere. Oops. That. So it kind of looks like this before, where basically it says, hey, do you want to look at this and review the answer? And then when you click review answer, it pops up with like, here's the question we found, here's the answer that we found, to now like condenses it all onto one screen, where it's like the question and answer all on screen, and you can edit both and you can store and ignore. The hope here is that by reducing friction, we're going to get some more people actually storing answers and stuff. This was only deployed yesterday, so there's not really any way to see any stats from that. And then kind of the third thing that I've been working on, and this isn't fully finished yet, but this is kind of still work in progress, is this idea around like dividing the content. So we have like a bunch of channels, in Kubernetes, and then this is kind of also really applicable in a lot of other places. But so in Kubernetes, we have like kube users and like novice, and then like mini kube and stuff. Those are all like the very technical channels, and then we have like career channels, and then we have like the SIG channels, right? And all of those are like, they have their own answers and they kind of have their own context, and trying to intermingle answers between the two probably doesn't really make sense. So the idea is to break out some of these things into different like groups, right? So then you have like, well, these are the default, but then you have like kube users would be like a specific list of channels, and the information there would be shared between those channels. And then the integrations, like we would pull in the Stack Overflow questions only into those questions, as opposed to like, for example, the careers channel we can roll on. It currently is not part of this, but it would be able to like see just, not the Stack Overflow questions and stuff. So just the idea of around like grouping information kind of into its own silos. So that's kind of what is in progress and should be done sometime this week. And that's into the future. So any questions, comments kind of about this?
No, that was great, Vlad. Thanks for the update.
Sure. I'm going to drop off then. Thanks, everyone.
Cheers, have a good one.
Hey, Vlad. Good hunting.
Thanks.
Okay, next on our agenda is Gwyn. You were looking to talk about the cherry pick experience.
Yeah, so as far as I understand, I kind of, one of my coworkers basically submitted a PR, got a merged into master, and really wanted to have support for 111 and 110 as well, and submitted cherry picks and followed the instructions and did all the things. And then it just kind of sat there, and it was unclear what was going to happen or who he should ping for attention, right? And so I understand that we're sort of blocked on automating cherry picks for reasons that I don't understand, that maybe somebody has some input on. But at the same time, I just wanted to improve the documentation and also try and figure out if maybe we can or should we have the bot pick up on the current patch branch manager, so that contributors know whom to ping. Because I think that in a lot of other communities, people aren't necessarily as willing to defend or fight for their PRs because they're worried about backlash or bothering people or something like that. And so if we had an official bot prompt, hey, this is the person that you should ping if this has been sitting around for a few days, that might be a good thing. I dropped a link to Aaron's umbrella issue, or someone's umbrella issue actually. That's over a year old though. So this is, I think, a recurring issue. For what it's worth, this particular contributor's experience with merging into master was just fine. It was the cherry pick process that seemed like really confusing and off-putting. And I tried to help out. I'm like on the release team, and I still was like, I'm super confused. Who's in charge? Who's the branch owner? I don't get it. Like, is that the patch release manager? Oh, okay. But I had to go around and like solicit information from humans, and not everyone is in a good place to do that.
So I know we were looking at the cherry pick process. I know Aaron was going to take a look at it, but things came up in the last cycle, and I know that work wasn't fully completed. But I know we were looking. I know Jordan Legit had created another proposal of another kind of path to overhaul the cherry pick experience. There might be some incremental improvements we can make now, but also, at least in my opinion, I think the entire kind of experience needs an overhaul as far as like what that process looks like, and and to also make it easier for branch managers to kind of understand what PRs they need to review, where they all are. Because right now, at least my understanding is the branch managers all kind of create their own queries in their own system for themselves.
That's accurate.
As opposed to kind of understanding like, hey, this is all set up for you. You just need to kind of go and look here in this one place for your branch to know like what is at least queued up and what steps are still needed, whether it's approval from code owners or whether it's just the branch manager's final approval that's needed.
Right. I'm also not entirely certain. It's a little bit weird because it's literally a one-person bottleneck, right? Because we have all the regular approval process. It has to be approved for the milestone. It has to be, SIG leads have to okay it and approve it and do all the things and add all the labels. And there's a ton of labels. And then it just sits there and waits for the branch manager to remove the cherry pick not approved. I'm not sure why we have that step necessarily, but I'm sure there's reasons.
I can answer. So after the .0 version of a release is cut, the entire release team disbands, and there is no more release team for patch releases going forward. That means it falls on one person to catch everything, both whether or not there are outstanding issues, whether or not the build is ready to go. And so the cherry pick process is oriented towards making their lives as easy as possible. That's why we've sort of backed away and allowed them to do whatever process they care to follow that makes them most comfortable. And what I have historically seen is that branch managers are not super attentive to notifications constantly because they're usually juggling a lot of other responsibilities. What they'll typically do is like set aside a couple hours on perhaps a weekly basis and sweep through everything that's sitting outstanding. And so they can use a label query to look at everything that has cherry picked, not approved, and then decide whether or not they, as the branch owner, want to manually apply that label. So it is kind of annoying that that reality is not explained to your new contributors, but like I'm hesitant to put too much friction on the process that makes it harder for the branch manager. And like, so the issue that you linked that is supposedly a year old is pretty much me just being lazy and taking an existing issue rather than creating a new issue. So all the stuff that was referenced about discussions we've had in the past, Liggett's proposal, the possibility of using a bot to add like a /cherry pick command, which is what the OpenShift folks have been doing for a little while, and adding additional labels that can be swept through to keep accounting for like, what if we want one pull request to master to be backported to like 3 different branches? How can we account for that in an automated manner? All of that is tracked in that issue. And then yes, mea culpa, I sounded like because I could articulate all this, like I was the guy who's gonna do it. And then I changed jobs and took a nice long break, and nobody has really stepped up to pick up the work. And I'm not going to be able to pick up the work in any way this quarter. So I feel like there are certainly incremental improvements that could be made if somebody wants to volunteer.
All right. I would support that. And I wasn't trying to say that we should make anything more difficult on the branch manager at all. I was actually confused why we have, if we have to go through a regular approval process, which we do, because who knows if these particular features will work with a particular version, right? Only the code owners, SIG leads have a reasonable idea of that. So as far as I can tell, the branch manager just puts the final stamp on it for like overview purposes. So that's all I was saying with like, why do we have that step? Right? Because it feels very like, just, it feels procedural.
It is procedural. You picked up on it. It absolutely is procedural, but there's a lot of cases where a branch manager may not want a PR to immediately to merge into a branch. It may be because they're freezing the branch for a couple days before cutting a release, and they want like a solid green CI signal over a couple different runs to know that they're safe to go and cut the next point release.
Yeah, that's
they
fair.
may freeze the entire branch actually for longer than that if the branch manager, through like non-public channels, finds that there is a security fix that needs to go out. So they may actually freeze the release branch for longer than that, and they can't tell anybody that they're doing that specifically because of our security embargo process. So there may be cases where a release branch is frozen for a month or longer because they know a security patch is coming, but they can't tell anybody just yet that a security patch is coming because of the embargo process. So there's a number of different reasons why a branch manager would choose to freeze a release branch. So that's why there's that extra step, and why everybody, like whether they have access to it or not, everybody defers to the branch manager, because that branch manager is ultimately the single point of contact responsible for the stability of that branch. And if they cut a release that has a regression, it would also be on them and their responsibility to fix it. On both sides of the fence, we always kind of just defer to that branch manager to control what merges into their branch and when.
Okay.
So I get that we're all explaining this verbally, and it'd be wonderful if it was like documented right on the portal.
That's what I was going to say. I'm like, this sounds like we have reasons for all these procedures, and we currently don't have automation. So sorry.
There are a couple meta problems here. Number one, I think because we defer to the branch manager as the singular person, like they can be overwhelmed. It'd be nice if we had a better release process, like more of a small release team for each branch. But so that's one way you could solve the problem. The other way you could solve the problem is to make it really, I saw some chatter in the channel about like making it just really clear sort of what our release life cycle looks like and where a given branch is in that release life cycle. So then you could understand like what the rules of play are. And then finally, the code that applies the cherry pick not approved label is sadly, I think, Munger in Munge GitHub. It would be awesome if somebody would be willing to turn that into a Prow plugin. And then as they do that, add the ability to like comment with like a link to the patch release manager role, like a description of who they are, what they do, a list of who they have been for the different branches to help the person find out more. This way, it's an informative link. It's right where the person opened their PR, and it doesn't actually ping anybody with a GitHub notification, because trust me, the patch managers know what to look for. But I don't foresee any changes being pushed into Munge GitHub because we really want it to go away. So we're not really making any more changes to Mungers.
Okay, cool. Also, thank you everyone for explaining this. I'm rewriting the doc a little bit right now, so this really helps give me some good background. I appreciate it. I'm going to take all further discussion onto that issue that you've been tracking, Aaron, and just kind of discuss options there so we have a record.
Okay, and like for what it's worth, I'm speaking on behalf of patch managers. I've never been one myself. I think it'd be wonderful to hear like what their opinions are.
Sure. We're also looking into an issue discovery automation tool on the release team right now. So somebody shared this, they wrote it. It looks pretty great. We're going to see if we can make it into something. You were there for that. Anyway. Yeah. Anyway, I'll comment on the issue.
One last question before we move on from myself. So Aaron, with your SIG testing hat on, do you know if there are ongoing efforts? Do you know if there is ongoing efforts behind like getting those last mungers out? I I know there's definitely been a consistent push to migrate away from the submit queue, but I know there's still like some mungers, like the milestone, like the cherry pick, like there's a few kind of last mungers sticking around. Do you know when, is there like a target drop dead date of like, we really want all the mungers and that entire munge cluster to go away?
I wish I could give you one. I really do. If it was the only thing that was on my plate, I would tell you it is this quarter. But it's not. I think like we kind of need to answer how we're gonna make the cherry pick process sane, because that wipes out most of the mungers. Then there's the milestone maintainer muncher, and beyond that, I'm not 100% clear what else remains aside from the submit queue. So like I think our focus is still like pretty much on the submit queue. And then I think the cherry pick stuff is the next biggest thing. But it's like, this is where I'd like to go reach out to patch release managers and branch managers and understand how much, if at all, they use the cherry pick queue for their day-to-day work. And if any of the munchers are of any help to them.
Right.
So I have an issue on, I can find it and link it. I have an issue of like all the munchers, but no, there's never been like time attached to it, just like slowly crossing things off the list.
Okay, that makes sense. Thank you.
So kind of related to that, I think I'm just going to roll on into my next two topics. And I'm going to jump down to the second one first because it's really easy. Just the extra notification that I'm going to migrate the priority failing test GitHub label to kind failing test. I've sent emails. I have some PRs held and ready to go. I'm just waiting for any further objections or comments. If you have any, raise them by 3 p.m. Pacific. Otherwise, I will do the needful. That's pretty much it for that. The next thing is there are folks in the kubeadm repo have developed this pattern where they manually add an active label to issues that they are working on so that people know that that issue is like somebody's got it. So don't, no need to jump in on it sort of deal. And they were wondering after talking with Ben whether it made sense to add it to the set of lifecycle labels so that you could just / lifecycle active instead of having to manually apply this label. So that sounded like a cool idea, but that kind of makes me think that overlaps an awful lot with the status in progress label that the release team uses and is consumed by the milestone maintainer muncher. It kind of feels to me like my personal thing with the milestone maintainer muncher is it's done an awful lot of nagging, and there are a lot of additional labels that people have to add, and it's unclear to me whether that's added additional value to the release process. And so, I like to reduce labels as much as possible. I'm thinking, what if I take away the status in progress label and replace it with the lifecycle active label? The idea being that any human or team of people who wants to follow this process of manually marking an issue as active if they're working on it can do so. Like I said, that's to help the kubeadm team. But we wouldn't necessarily want to mandate that as a process. And we probably wouldn't want to have like a bot sweep through and automatically like apply lifecycle active labels to issues that have been touched within N days, right? But it could be just an extension of the bot that goes through and applies lifecycle stale to issues that haven't been touched in 30 days or some threshold like that. We could say if an issue hasn't been touched within N days, it loses its active label so that people know that maybe that's not actually being worked. So I kind of brain dumped all of this in the issue that's linked in the agenda, but I'm really curious what like release team folks' perspective is on this, because I see 2 former release leads and an issue triage person here. So
the first thing I'll say is I absolutely agree with you that the nagging being done by the milestone muncher bot is at this point ineffective because people get too much traffic and so they ignore it. And you'll find that in a couple of release retros if you look back at the release retros.
So we can just straight up turn the bot off just to address that.
We want the bot to do things like auto close issues that shouldn't be open, say during feature filters. And if we're having an auto close, then we need to at least post a notice in the comments on the issue that's going to be auto closed if nothing else happens. But I personally don't see a good reason why to replace status in progress with lifecycle active, but I don't see a good reason not to. And if for some reason the people who are going to use it really prefer lifecycle active, it's not a problem. I found in the 1.11 cycle, people did not really use status in progress. I would want to do one other thing with that to reduce the impact of cookie licking. For those unfamiliar with the this particular slang term, that means when you touch an issue and say, I'm working on this, and then go on vacation, would be to have lifecycle active automatically disabled if there isn't activity on the issue or PR within a certain period of time. The label would be automatically removed. That'll take some finessing to work out, though, because like in the case of the kubeadmin issues, there often is activity, but the activity is in the kubeadmin repository and not in the active one that they've, say, marked in Kubernetes. And I'm not really sure how to handle that.
But we're just talking about a label, right? We're not necessarily talking about automation that will force things on your PR.
Yeah, these can be done in bite-sized steps, right? So, like literally, you all know the bot that goes through and applies like lifecycle stale is literally just a program that can, given a GitHub query, go like post a comment based on that GitHub query. And it just so happens that if the comment includes / commands, then it does the same things that a human could do if the human posted that comment with those / commands. And so that's how we have the query set up for like, if an issue hasn't been touched in 30 days and it has lifecycle stale, it's going to have lifecycle rotten added to it. So there's nothing saying we couldn't start tweaking that kind of fun stuff. I just thought one of the advantages of lifecycle stale over status in progress, for example, is the status command is restricted to people who are in the Kubernetes milestone maintainers team. Whereas like if I turn it into a lifecycle command, anybody can use it. Literally anybody, not even members.
So this sounds like a pretty good refactor to me, honestly. Just have fewer labels, have one label that does similar things. The only thing where, so basically as a bug triage person, the timeline under which I need action on a particular issue or pull request keeps getting shorter and shorter and shorter throughout the release process. So I don't know that we can necessarily sell this kind of as in like, oh, hey, now issues are just more easily discoverable as active, because that label means nothing if it only gets applied, if something has been going on in the last 7 to 14 days. If it's like at the end of the release cycle, I need daily action, for example. And so that kind of granularity, I don't think is appropriate for a label like that.
I feel like part of that is that in a way, the label is implying that it's assigned, like if assigned was just not taken. But I really like the aspect that Aaron mentioned where right now you can only assign to a member, right? Where this could say like so-and-so non-member is trying to take it up, and for new contributors, that's actually important.
That's a really good point.
So anyway, I just wanted to hash it out here. I would love to see discussion on that issue, like I said, especially from release team folks, since this primarily affects your lives. And like, I don't have to be, I actually would prefer it if I don't be the guy to do this. Like, I think this is another like great task for somebody else to take on if they want to. It's one of those, just because I'm just talking about it doesn't mean like I have all the time in the world to do it, but it seems like a good idea.
Yep, Aaron, just quick. This looks pretty cool. I was just wondering, there's another label status in review as well. Is that relevant for the name change, similar to lifecycle? Again, considering the aspect that, more people can see it and use it with lifecycle. So it's similar, like in progress, there's a thing called in review, status
Sure.
in review.
I'm not really sure. It's possible, but again, that's one of those things that feels a little bit like additional process for process sake. It's I don't know, like personally, I haven't seen the status command used a whole bunch, but that's just my take.
Yeah, sorry, it was cutting for me, Aaron. So no worry, I can catch up later. But yeah, I think my internet connection or something. I didn't hear the last couple lines you said. Sorry.
No, it's I just haven't seen the status command being used. So I'm not sure how much people use the in review thing. This is one of those cases where I'm trying to like pave the cow paths where I can see people are using a thing called active, and it seems to make sense to put it there.
Okay, yeah, sure, yeah. Cool, thanks.
Yeah, I'll say as an ex-release lead, I'm also really in detail, everything else being equal, in favor of anything that removes required labels from the code freeze and code slush process.
Yeah, I think like to Gwen's earlier point about the contributor having to go through like all these ridiculous labels to get something contributed to master and then something totally different for a release branch. I personally feel like a lot of those ridiculous labels are, so process scarring, right, is where we made a mistake once, right? And then we created a whole new process and a whole new set of things to do it. And then we never actually looked back to see if it helped us. It's just process for, like, it just seemed like a good idea at the time. And then because of, what's the word? Anyway, like the next release team basically builds on top of that instead of looking to see if the root cause was addressed. So it's unclear to me how helpful those things have been.
From a release member perspective, I feel like one of the things, like exactly that sort of scarring that you describe is happening, but also the release team is going to have to do some level of tracking on their own that's outside of GitHub and have some sense somewhere else of what is active, what's important in a very subjective way, or what's worrying. And by pushing that into labels that everybody in the community, all however many thousand people, have to comprehend and keep track of and keep up to date, I think that's unfair of us on the release team. And right now, the system doesn't work ideally for us, but while we're trying to figure out how to make it better, we should incur most of the hit, I think, not the entire community.
I have a comment that I'm not sure makes sense, but when I hear lifecycle active, I don't necessarily immediately jump to this is being worked on. I don't know what the life cycle is. Is it the release cycle? Is it whose life cycle? The PR's life cycle? Do I have to be part of a life cycle now? It sounds kind of like a big and scary thing. So it's not a very intuitive name for a label when we want it to mean, hi, I'm working on this, right? I mean, it really is, that's what we're trying to say. It's supposed to be an overall, hello, I am working on this. This is active, and then we can get some automation going that recognizes that label and checks against the time of the last activity on that issue or pull request. Pull request in this case, right? But, or issue, I guess. Anyway.
I don't know, maybe.
I don't like the word lifecycle active, and I understand that it's a label that we already have, but for like general use, I'm like, ooh, what's a life cycle? Is there a metamorphosis? Is there, will there be a better?
Where's the state machine drawn up on the web?
So it's true. And again, it's the sort of thing where I don't want to create like a required life cycle for everybody. It's just a convenience. The lifecycle label is already being used, right? I'm not sure if you've looked at an issue with lifecycle stale and scratched your head in the same way, wondering what that means. But we also have like documentation or description for the labels. So if you're confused about it, you can go look it up.
Yeah, and when a bot puts that label on there, right? It's a Theta bot, right? then I understand, oh, yeah, there has been no activity. It literally says there has been no activity on this.
Right.
But that's a different situation, right? Because that label gets put on there automatically and it comes with an explanation. So yeah, I know what that means. But if I, as a contributor who's just like, hey, I want to do this one thing and I want to make sure like it looks like I'm working on it, my first instinct is to go /assign. And that won't work if I'm not a member. And then there's a different process here. I have to know the label exists and I have to know what it means before I use it.
Yeah,
it's not like I see it and then I find out what it is.
Like I said, I'm not trying to create the process. I'm trying to enable those people who already use such a process to use it without having to have write access to the repo. And if it turns out to work well for them, we can point to that as an example.
Yeah, I definitely don't see a harm in like enabling it. But if it's already a label, maybe I lost a little bit track of the initial intent on what you're doing with that label. It's already a label and we want to.
Currently today, the label is just named active and it's just on the kubeadm repo, right? And so people have to have write access to that repo and they have to manually apply the label. I am proposing that it turn into something you can apply with /lifecycle. And so the label turns into lifecycle /foo because I like the pattern where foo /bar can be applied with /foo bar.
Right, okay, sorry. I just argued myself in circles and then got confused. Thank you, sorry.
So my understanding is correct. The main difference between like an issue that does not have the label versus one that does have the label is lifecycle active means a human has confirmed that somebody is working on this actively. But otherwise, there is no difference as far as the way bots treat those labels at all. It's just like a human has confirmed that somebody is actively working on this. And then if the issue does go to stale, as in nobody's commented for 90 days, then because of the nature of the lifecycle plugin, active would also get pulled off when it goes to stale.
Correct. And then I think it's totally up to you as a group or perhaps individual project maintainers if they want to do like more aggressive queries. So maybe like the release team wants a query that specifically says, hey, if there happen to be any issues marked as lifecycle active in the current release milestone, like drop the label and add a comment warning that the label's been dropped because the issue hasn't been updated in N days, right? Instead of having to comment every time saying, yep, I checked and the labels are still good, just comment and say, hey, something's up. Anyway. That's all I got. Paris, I see you added a couple agenda items.
Yes. Bob, I saw you helping take notes. Thank you. If you could help take notes for what I'm about to say, I'd greatly appreciate it. So mentoring, we have sort of paused on a lot of the initiatives that we currently have on the plate, and that's because I'm the single human bus in this process, and we have had a ton of community-related safety concerns that I've been focusing very heavily on. So things like Zoom, and doing some code of conduct research and other safety-related matters that I feel take priority over most things that we do, just to keep our community safe. So a lot has been halted there. However, I feel like we're at a place where I can start back up again. And in that start, I'd really like to form a small crew of people that are committed to helping pushing these mentoring initiatives with me. As I've mentioned before, a lot of the infrastructure has already been built. I mean, most of the infrastructure has been built. But the problem is now that we've done test cases for everything and retros for everything, the retros have brought about new process improvements, and Garrett has been working on automating a lot of this stuff so that there is no human bus. However, a lot of the retros have picked up process improvements that need to happen before the automation can happen. So we're sort of in a blocked state, if you will. So if anybody on the line is heavily invested this year on mentoring initiatives, I'd love to work with you to get some of these blockers unblocked. And this would just be process improvements. I'll give you a prime example. So we have this thing called the one-on-one hour. And I think 3 of our most asked for things as far as mentoring is concerned is code-based tours, pair programming, and code reviewing, either going through someone's code as a reviewer or actually someone getting their code reviewed live. Those are the most, in my eyes, most 3 requested things, especially from current contributors. So the one-on-one hour addresses those 3 things specifically, as well as other things. But there's a lot of little teeny things in this process. Like, for instance, what tools do they use? Do we use a standard tool for pair programming? Like, how do we educate this large of a population on how they should conduct pair programming, and just guidance around the actual logistics. So if you're interested, I'd love to also set up either a weekly or a bi-weekly cadence, just depending on discussions from the group with mentoring initiatives, so we can give each other updates and set tasks. I can even set a project board for us so that we can really kick this thing off, and then hopefully by the end of the year have all of our mentoring initiatives rolling that meet all of our needs. So that's mentoring. Questions, concerns, comments. Does anybody want to join me for this mentoring adventure?
I'll throw my hat in.
Okay, Jeff. I will put you to work.
I've told George he can abuse my free time all he wants, so you may as well be put on that list too.
All right. Well, with YouTube privileges now comes mentoring privileges. All right. Awesome.
I don't want to overextend myself, but in general, I'm interested.
Okay.
So I will have to be very careful with my time, though.
Yep, of course. And I think that's one of our many issues right now is time. So I'm hoping when we get up and running with mentoring that won't be too much of an issue for people.
Oh, hang on. I have a total deadline on this.
Yeah.
After 1:12 is out the door, then I might have some time to help with this.
So you're doing great, sweetie. Keep going. Keep chugging.
Anyway, I'm like, no, I want to help. But then I was like, wait, no, we're going to wait until after 1:12. but then you have, then I'll definitely have some energy and hopefully time.
Awesome. All right. Well, if no one has anything else, I will proceed to my next bullet while Gwen laughs. All right, so the next bullet is the survey. Deep embedded in this agenda, which I can't find right now because I'm on my mobile, there is a link to a Google Doc that has the contributor experience mid-year survey. So I would love to get this out as soon as possible. Reason why is because I think a lot of what we're working on should be prioritized by the community. I'd love to hear what the community thinks that our priority should be. And I think that it's important to evaluate the stuff that we've already done, like the contributor guide, in a quantitative way. And if we could get this out, the last survey we ran, we had 140 participants. I bet we could get at least 200 this go around, which would be, I think, a great number for us. Another thing that I'd love to evaluate is our communication pipelines. Right now, we're doing a lot with figuring out what works best for the community for different needs and different audiences, and what a better way to ask than the community themselves. So we can evaluate things like Slack and mailing lists, and stop making personal assumptions and get some quantitative data on this stuff before we start taking things away from people. And so if you have any questions that you want to ask or address to a wide range of contributors, if anybody on the line is working on something, especially automation, labels, let's get them into that doc. And I'll actually also have someone here at Google review the questions that they do surveys on a full-time basis. So to make sure that we're asking the right questions and getting the answers that we're looking for. So that's it. That's all I wanted to say about the survey. Anybody have any questions, concerns, comments about a contributor experience survey?
So basically pass it out in our offices.
Yeah, essentially. But we'll also do like a blog post and tweet, and we'll get a little communication strategy going around it. Like CNCF will most likely tweet it and do blog posts and stuff like that. And then of course, definitely pass it along through your individual work channels and Kubernetes channels, whatever you want. Anybody else? All right. That's it for me.
I think that brings us to our end of the agenda. We have 9 minutes. Is there any last comments or issues anybody wants to bring up?
Thanks for running the meeting, Christoph.
I have some issues regarding labeling, but I think we've dwelt on that enough, this particular thing, so I'll add it to next meeting's agenda.
I guess I had a quick, just a quick verbal brain dump on where we're at with the GitHub management sub-project. What are next steps there?
Oh yeah, GitHub management. It's established now. I need to herd things together, basically. So as the current owner of that sub project, I need to kind of figure out, get some things down as far as like what our priorities would be, get feedback from the SIG, kind of just establish the framework of it. Right. I also have an open question that I'm asking about the org owner permissions, in particular around the security org that I've asked out to the product security team to understand whether the product security team wants to take responsibility for their org or whether they want Contribex to help with that. And then based on their feedback, then we'll know, okay, what is basically the purview, which orgs are we going to take on, and kind of go from there. I should have some more stuff and kind of framework as far as at least where I see the direction going next meeting. And then we can kind of and collect some feedback and kind of go from there.
Okay, that sounds cool. I think my personal opinion is figuring out who the group of people are that have the superpowers would be a good early step. And one place we could codify that is the people who service the Kubernetes membership Google group right now and have the ability to add people to different orgs. That seems like a thing that's going to continue to exist while we look to roll out the tooling that will automate that job away. Or I'm not sure if it'll automate it away, but anyway, like that might be a quick Band-Aid that sort of helps solidify the team and at least some set of roles before we look at like broader policy and whatnot.
That's kind of the direction I was going to. I know Caleb's cycles, I wanted to touch base with Caleb, but his cycles and his time zones are off right now as he is in another part of the world. So when he gets back, I have to talk to him and see like how he wants to deal with that. But I want to touch base with Caleb and Eeyore because they're doing most of that work today anyways for Kubernetes membership. And yeah, get some feedback from them. But that's kind of the direction I was thinking as opposed to like, who are the people who are actively using the powers today? And then defining a group around that.
Christoph, I have all that info because I'm an admin on that distro. So I can tell you everyone who adds people and who is admins on the Google group and owners, and I can give you a lot of that data.
Yeah, I mean, we can scrape the org audit logs to find that out too.
Yeah.
So.
Okay. hopefully I'll have some more information next meeting as far as like at least that framework. I just haven't had the cycles in the last couple of days since it got basically approved on last Friday, and I merged the PR on Monday. So I just haven't had the time this week to like wrap my head around that yet.
Totally understand. All right, I'm done saying things. Thank you.
Okay, sounds good. Thanks everybody for joining, and we will see everybody back here next week.
Thank you.
Happy Wednesday.